In a small, quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, there was an old house that looked forgotten by time. The paint on the walls was fading, the windows were dusty, and the garden was overgrown. People often walked past without even looking at it. But inside that house lived a man named Mr. Arman. Mr. Arman was not like the others in the neighborhood. He spoke very little. He never joined any festivals, never visited anyone, and no one ever visited him. Every morning, he would water the same 3 plants in front of his house. He would then sit on his small wooden chair and watch the world go by. Children said he was strange. Some adults called him that lonely man. But Mr. Arman didn't care. He had lived in that house for 10 years, alone. People thought he was poor. He wore the same clothes every day. A plain shirt, old trousers, and simple sandals. He never drove a car. He never ordered food. He would go to the nearby shop, buy a few vegetables, and come back without speaking a word. But what they didn't know was that Mr. Arman was watching everything. He saw how people treated each other. He noticed kindness. He noticed cruelty. And he remembered. One summer morning, something new happened. A construction company arrived in the area. They had big machines, loud trucks, and a plan to break down some old buildings and build new ones. The street became noisy. People complained. But the construction workers didn't care. Among them were 3 young men, loud, proud, and full of attitude. They noticed Mr. Arman sitting alone on his chair. "Hey, look at that guy," one of them laughed. "He's been sitting there since morning. Maybe he's waiting for someone to talk to him. Poor guy," another joked. The third man picked up an empty soda can and threw it near Mr. Arman's feet. Mr. Arman didn't move. He just looked at them, calm, silent. They laughed again and walked away. The next day, they came back. This time, they were louder. They played music, danced on the street, and shouted rude jokes. Mr. Arman, as usual, just sat quietly. But something changed that day. One of them walked up to his fence. "This fence is too close to the road," he said. "We might have to break it." Mr. Arman didn't speak. He just stood up slowly, walked to his door, and went inside. "Did you see that?" The young man laughed. "He's scared of us." But deep inside the house, Mr. Arman stood by a shelf. On that shelf was a small black box. He opened it and looked at the photograph inside. It was a picture of a woman, smiling, full of life. He whispered, "You always said people show their real face when they think no one is watching." That evening, the construction manager arrived to check the work. The workers complained to him. "There's an old man here, sir. His house is in the way. He's not letting us do our job," one added. The manager looked at the house, then took out his phone to make a report. But when he entered the name of the street and the house number into his company app, he froze. The screen showed something he didn't expect. Owner of this land, Arman A. Khan. Shareholder, Prime Build Constructions. Top investor, silent partner. His hands began to shake. He looked again. Arman A. Khan, silent partner. Here. He had only heard the name in board meetings. The company often spoke about a hidden investor, a man who never showed his face, but helped the company grow with his money. Nobody knew where he lived. Nobody ever met him. Until now. The manager slowly turned his head toward the small house and the quiet man sitting outside. Mr. Arman was still there, sitting, watching. He gave a small nod. No words, just silence. But in that silence, there was power, there was mystery, and there was a storm coming. The next morning, the workers returned, louder, ruder, and even more careless. They didn't care about the neighborhood. They played loud music, blocked the road with their trucks, and threw trash near people's homes. But the one house they laughed at the most was Mr. Arman's. "Look at him again," one worker said, pointing. "Still sitting there, like a statue." Another laughed. Maybe he's waiting for someone to save him. Poor old man. They threw an empty plastic bottle into his garden. It hit one of the small flower pots. The plant inside broke in half. Mr. Armand didn't move. He looked at the broken flower, then back at the men. Still, he said nothing. Later that day, while working near Mr. Armand's fence, one of the workers picked up a metal rod. "This fence is weak," he said. "Let's just break it and move ahead." The others agreed. They hit the wooden fence twice. A loud cracking sound echoed through the street. A small piece broke off. The neighbors heard it. Some looked out their windows. But no one said a word. No one wanted to get involved. Mr. Armand stood up from his chair. Slowly, he walked to the broken part of his fence. He picked up the broken wood and placed it aside carefully. One of the men smirked. "Why don't you say something, old man?" Mr. Armand looked at him, calmly, quietly, and then walked back to his chair. At the construction site, the manager was under pressure. He had received a call from the office about a silent investor connected to this property. The message was simple: do not disturb the man in the house, show respect, or face the consequences. But he hadn't told the workers yet. He thought they'd be careful on their own. He was wrong. That evening, the workers gathered near Mr. Armand's gate again. This time, they were mocking him louder. "Maybe we should take down the whole fence," one joked. "Maybe we should ask him to leave," another added. "He won't even speak. What can he do? He's just a lonely old man." Mr. Armand stood at his gate. He finally spoke, just 4 words. "This land knows me." The workers laughed even more. What does that mean? But deep inside, something about his voice felt different. It wasn't loud, but it had weight. That night, the construction manager couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the man, his silence, his eyes, and that message from the top office. So he made a decision. The next morning, he visited the company headquarters. He met the head of internal affairs and showed him the name: Armand A. Khan. The man at the desk sat up straight. "You mean the Mr. Khan, our ghost investor?" The manager nodded slowly. "You've seen him?" the officer asked, shocked. "Yes," the manager replied. "He lives on the land we're working on." The team, we didn't know. They disrespected him, broke his fence, threw things into his yard. The officer's face turned pale. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "This man, he saved this company 5 years ago. When we were in debt, he gave us funds, but asked for one thing: privacy. That's all. He said, 'Let me live where I want. Don't disturb me.'" The room fell silent. Back at the construction site, the workers were joking again until they saw something unexpected. The manager had returned, but he wasn't alone. Behind him were 2 suit-wearing men, walking seriously with files in hand. They stopped in front of the workers. "You will stop all activity on this side of the land immediately," one of them said. "Why?" the workers asked. "What happened?" The manager looked at them, his eyes full of disappointment. "You've been shouting at the man who pays your salaries," he said. "You broke the fence of the man who owns this company's future." The workers were confused. "Who is he?" The manager pointed to the small house. "To you, he looks like no one. But to us, he is the reason you have this job." The men stood there, frozen. Everything they had done, the jokes, the trash, the broken fence, it all came back to their minds. But now, those memories didn't feel funny. They felt shameful. And Mr. Armand, he was still sitting on that chair, calm, quiet, watching. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't called the police. He hadn't asked for revenge. But his silence had spoken louder than all their noise. Who really was this man? And what other secrets was he hiding? The answer was just beginning to unfold. That night, the workers couldn't sleep. Their laughter had stopped. Their jokes had turned into whispers, and their pride had turned into fear. All because of one man, the quiet man in the old house, the man they called strange, the man they thought was weak. But now they knew. He was powerful, more powerful than they could ever imagine. While they sat in confusion, Mr. Armand stood alone in his small living room. It was a quiet space, clean, but filled with memories. On one side of the wall hung a picture frame, an old photograph of a younger Mr. Armand standing beside a beautiful woman. Both were smiling, full of life, the kind of smile that comes from love and peace. He looked at the photo and whispered, "You always knew people would misunderstand me." He walked to a wooden drawer and opened it. Inside were files, letters, certificates, and a black leather folder. He opened it gently, like it was something sacred. Inside were documents that told a story no one in the neighborhood had ever heard. Years ago, Armand Khan wasn't quiet. He was one of the top financial minds in the city. He worked for a private investment group, not just any group, but a secretive circle of billionaires, CEOs, and global partners. They didn't appear in magazines. They didn't give interviews. But behind the scenes, they moved millions, sometimes billions, into companies, businesses, and properties. Mr. Armand was the mind behind many of those deals. He was the silent hand that saved failing companies, helped start new hospitals, and gave thousands of people jobs, without ever showing his face in public. But all that changed when tragedy struck. 10 years ago, Mr. Armand lost the love of his life, his wife, Sophia. She had been everything to him, his peace in a noisy world, his anchor when his success became overwhelming. She loved gardens, small houses, and simple moments. They had dreamed of living in a quiet place, away from the fast city, somewhere they could grow old together, away from noise, greed, and fake smiles. But fate had other plans. Sophia passed away after a short illness, and Mr. Armand changed forever. He disappeared from the public world, sold his mansion, left the investment group quietly, and with the last of his savings, he bought a small house in an unknown street, in a neighborhood where no one would recognize him. But he didn't disappear completely. From time to time, he would still invest secretly, helping companies, rebuilding schools, supporting orphanages, all under one name. Silent Partner, A.A. Khan. He never asked for fame, never wanted credit. He just wanted peace and to keep his promise to Sophia. This house, this small, simple house, was her dream. And so he made it his truth. But even in silence, the world finds a way to test you. When the construction workers broke his fence, when they laughed at him, when they called him useless, they didn't just disrespect a man. They disrespected a story filled with love, loss, sacrifice, and power hidden behind kindness. Meanwhile, in the construction company office, panic had spread. One of the company directors had received a letter directly from the board. It read, "One of our founding investors has been insulted at his own home. This is not acceptable. Pause the project. Send a formal apology. And find out who allowed this to happen." The workers had no idea how far the situation had gone. To them, Mr. Armand was just a quiet neighbor. To the company, he was a name they feared, a name that carried weight in silence. Back at home, Mr. Armand sat in his garden, carefully planting a new flower where the old one had broken. As he touched the soil, his mind drifted back to Sophia's voice. "When people hurt you, don't become like them. Let your silence teach them, louder than your words ever can." The neighbors started to notice changes too. The noisy construction slowed down. Workers walked more carefully. Even the loud music stopped. Whispers began spreading. "Who is he really? Did you hear? They say he owns the company. But why does he live like this?" No one had answers. Only Mr. Armand did. And he had no plans to explain. Because the truth was, he had nothing to prove. But the story wasn't over yet. The workers had seen their mistake, but now they had to face their guilt. And Mr. Arman, he had one last lesson to teach them, not with anger, but with grace. The quiet man was about to become unforgettable. The mood at the construction site had completely changed. The workers who once laughed loudly were now quiet. The music that once echoed through the streets had stopped. And the men who once threw trash near Mr. Arman's gate now avoided looking at his house at all. Their disrespect had been exposed. And now, it was time to face it. One of the younger workers, Imran, couldn't sleep the whole night. He kept thinking about Mr. Arman's calm face, how the man never shouted, never complained, and yet owned the land they stood on. He remembered the broken flower pot, the mocking laughter, and the way they all called him poor and useless. But the truth, the man was a hidden billionaire, a man who could have destroyed their careers with just one phone call, but didn't. Instead, Mr. Arman remained calm, still, silent. That silence now echoed inside them like thunder. The next morning, the workers stood together in front of the site. No one was talking. They were all waiting for instructions, or maybe for punishment. The construction manager walked in with a serious face. Behind him was a black car. A man in a suit stepped out and handed him a letter. The manager opened it slowly and read aloud. To all staff involved in the disrespect shown toward Mr. Arman A. Khan, you are being given one final chance. Not because you deserve it, but because he asked us not to take action against you. He believes in grace. He believes people can change. Don't make him regret that belief. The workers lowered their heads. Shame covered their faces, not because of the letter, but because of the kindness they never gave, and now received. Later that afternoon, Imran walked toward Mr. Arman's gate alone. He held a small flower pot with a new plant inside. It wasn't expensive, just simple white flowers, freshly watered. He stood at the gate, nervous. His hands shook, but he rang the bell. Mr. Arman opened the door slowly. His calm eyes met Imran's. Imran swallowed hard and said softly, I broke your flower that day. I threw the bottle. I laughed. And I'm sorry. He held out the new flower. I thought you were nobody. I didn't know. I didn't care. But now I see. You didn't need to speak to show us who you are. Mr. Arman looked at the flower for a long moment. Then, with a gentle nod, he took it. No words, just a quiet thank you, spoken with the eyes. One by one, other workers followed. They cleaned up the trash near his gate. They repaired the broken part of the fence. They even painted it, without being asked. Not because they feared Mr. Arman, but because now they respected him. They had disrespected a man who could have punished them. Instead, he taught them a lesson, without a single threat. One worker, Salim, who was always the loudest, sat alone on a stone block. He spoke to another and said, "You know what's crazy? If he had shouted, we would have shouted back." But he stayed silent, and somehow that hurt more. The other nodded. His silence wasn't weak. It was stronger than all of us. That evening, the entire street felt different. For the first time, neighbors came out and greeted Mr. Arman. They offered tea, asked if he needed help with anything, smiled as they passed by. All these years, they ignored him. Some feared him, most judged him. But now they knew, this quiet man was never alone. He was simply at peace with himself, something they all lacked. Inside his home, Mr. Arman sat down with a cup of tea. He looked out the window and smiled, just a little. He took out a notebook and began writing something. On the top of the page, it read, "When people stop listening to words, teach them through silence." He closed the notebook, stood up, and walked to the small flower in his garden, the one Imran had brought. He planted it with care. As the sun began to set, his voice broke the silence for the first time that day. He whispered, You were right, Sophia. People don't change with punishment. They change with realization. The story of Mr. Armen was now spreading across the neighborhood. But the best part, no one could truly explain who he was. They just said, he's not just a man. He's a reminder that real power doesn't make noise. Weeks passed. The construction was completed. The noise had stopped. The trucks were gone. But something had changed in the neighborhood, something deeper than the buildings. It was the way people looked at one another now. They no longer ignored the quiet man in the old house. In fact, every person who walked past his gate now gave a small nod, a smile, or a soft greeting. Some even left little gifts at his doorstep. Books, flowers, thank you notes. But Mr. Armen never asked for any of it. He still lived the same way. Simple clothes, quiet walks, and soft eyes. Yet, everything around him had changed. One morning, a young boy from the neighborhood named Ellie knocked on his gate. Mr. Armen opened the door gently. The boy looked up and asked, "Uncle, is it true you're a rich man?" Mr. Armen smiled kindly and said, "Rich, maybe, but not because of money." Ali frowned. "Then why do people say you're powerful?" Mr. Armen knelt down and pointed at the boy's chest. "Because power comes from here, not from money, but from how you treat people, even when they treat you badly." The boy nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand, but somehow he felt it was true. That same day, the workers returned, but this time not for construction. They came dressed in clean clothes, each holding something small. Some had sweets, others brought cards. Imran carried a letter. One by one, they approached Mr. Armen's home. The manager stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Sir, we came to say something, not because we were told to, but because we wanted to." He looked down at his hands. "You could have destroyed our lives, but instead you fixed our thinking. You made us feel ashamed without ever shouting. You gave us a second chance, and we promise we won't waste it." He handed the letter to Mr. Armen. It was a simple note with 14 signatures. At the bottom it said, "We met a silent man, and he made more noise in our hearts than all our mistakes combined." Mr. Armen accepted the letter. He nodded, the same soft nod he always gave. But this time, his eyes were full of tears, not because he was hurt, but because after so many years of silence, he had finally been heard. That evening, he sat alone in his garden. The flowers were blooming. The wind was calm, and the air carried peace, the same peace he once shared with Sophia. He looked up at the stars and spoke softly. "We built no statue. We wrote no book. But somehow, this story will live. Because it was never about money, never about revenge. It was always about one truth. When the world speaks in noise, the strongest answer is silence filled with purpose." From that day forward, people in the area began telling stories about him. They said, "That old man, he changed everything without ever raising his voice. He taught us how to see people, not judge them. He reminded us that respect doesn't come from fear, it comes from heart." And slowly, they started to live differently. They helped one another more. They listened before speaking. They showed kindness, not because they were weak, but because they were stronger now. All because of one man, a quiet man with a loud legacy. Months passed. The season slowly changed. The flowers in Mr. Armen's garden now danced with the wind. Children played outside more. The street was alive, not with noise, but with kindness. People had changed, but they didn't forget who changed them. One morning, Mr. Armen woke up and made his usual tea. As he opened his gate to sit on the front step, he found something unusual waiting outside. It was a small wooden box, carefully wrapped in cloth. There was no name, no note, just one word carved into the top. "For you." Mr. Armen slowly picked it up, brought it inside, and opened it. Inside, there were photographs. Old, faded, but familiar. Pictures of him and Sophia from years ago, laughing in their garden, smiling under the same tree he had planted now. And beside the photos was a small USB drive. Curious, he plugged it into his old laptop. A video began to play. The screen showed a young woman standing near a garden. She spoke directly to the camera. "Mr. Armin, you don't know me, but my mother did. Her name was Sophia. She met you once at a bookshop before you were famous. You gave her a free book and said, 'Stories can save people too.' That moment saved her life. She always talked about you, about your heart, about how much she respected you." The girl smiled gently. "When she passed away last year, she left something behind. A wish. She told me, if you ever find him, give him this. And now, I have." The camera cut to a shot of a small plot of land, filled with green space, benches, and trees. A sign stood in the middle. It read, "The Garden of Quiet Strength, in honor of Armin A. Khan and Sophia Khan." Mr. Armin stared at the screen. He didn't blink. He didn't move. His heart, already full, felt like it was overflowing. Someone somewhere had been touched by his past. And now, they had created a living memory of both him and the woman he loved most. Later that week, the whole neighborhood gathered as a surprise. They had heard about the garden. So the workers, neighbors, and even children worked together to build a smaller version right on his street, just like the one in the video. They planted flowers, painted a wooden bench, and hung a sign that simply said, "Home of the Quiet Man." It wasn't just a garden. It was a thank you that would grow forever. Mr. Armin stepped out to see it. His hands trembled, but his heart stood tall. Imran, the same young man who once mocked him, stepped forward and said, "Sir, we've been given so much, but this is our gift to you." The crowd stayed silent, watching him with respect. Mr. Armin walked to the bench, sat down slowly, and smiled, a smile full of peace, memory, and meaning. Then he looked at everyone and finally spoke, not in anger, not in pride, but in soft truth. Sometimes the world forgets that a quiet heart can teach the loudest lessons. Thank you for listening. The days passed gently. Mr. Armin's garden grew more beautiful with each sunrise. The flowers bloomed as if they knew they were planted in peace. Children often came to sit near him, bringing small gifts, cookies, drawings, or just stories. Everyone respected him now. Everyone listened. But Mr. Armin still kept one chair empty near his bench, every single day. No one knew why. One afternoon, just as the sky turned gold, a black car quietly stopped outside Mr. Armin's gate. A tall man in a brown coat stepped out. His face was half covered with a hat. He walked slowly, like someone carrying both years and secrets. He stopped at the garden fence, looking around. Then his eyes found Mr. Armin, sitting quietly on his bench, with his notebook open. The man gave a small nod and softly asked, "May I sit here?" Mr. Armin didn't look surprised. He simply pointed to the empty chair beside him. "As if I've been waiting," he said. The man sat down. They didn't speak for a while. Only the sound of birds filled the silence. Then the man whispered, "You still write, like she did." Mr. Armin paused. The pen in his hand stopped moving. "You knew Sophia?" The man nodded. "I knew her long ago. Before you met her, we were both students, writers, dreamers. But I chose a different road. I chased money, power. I lost myself. And her." Mr. Armin's eyes softened. His voice barely broke the air. "She never hated you. She just said, you were a good man who got lost in a loud world." The man smiled sadly. "And now, I found myself again. And I found you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather journal. "This was hers," he said. "She gave it to me when we said goodbye. I never had the courage to open it. Until last week." He handed the book to Mr. Arman. "She wrote about you, about your silence, your soul, your garden dreams, and she said one day you'd build a home not just with walls, but with peace." Mr. Arman gently opened the first page. Inside, in Sophia's handwriting, it said, "If I'm gone, give this to him. He will understand every word, because he listens with his heart." A tear escaped Mr. Arman's eye. He didn't wipe it away. The man stood up. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said softly, "for loving her the way I couldn't." Mr. Arman looked up and replied, "She didn't need perfect. She needed real. And now, maybe you found that too." The man nodded. He gave a final look at the garden, then walked away, slowly but lighter than before. That night, Mr. Arman sat under the tree. The same tree where he once held Sophia's hand. The same tree where he planted Imran's flower. He opened her journal and read each page under the moonlight. Her words were like whispers from the stars. Every sentence reminded him, "The quiet ones are not weak. They are simply waiting for the world to slow down and feel." The next morning, a small sign appeared near the garden. It read, "One chair will always remain empty, for those still searching for peace." And the people understood. Because Mr. Arman's story wasn't just about being rich or being silent. It was about being whole, even after being broken. Now travelers from other towns visited his garden. Writers came for inspiration. Families came for calm. And broken hearts came to heal. All from the story of one quiet man who said little but meant everything. Years passed. The little street that once ignored the quiet man had now become a place of stories, memories, and healing. People called it the Lane of Peace. No one honked. No one shouted. Even the children played softer here, as if the air itself had learned to respect silence. Mr. Arman, now older, thinner, walked slower, but he still came to sit in the garden each morning, on the same bench, beside the same empty chair. He carried the same notebook, the same pen, and the same soft eyes that once hid deep pain, now full of quiet strength. One morning, a strong wind swept through the street. It was gentle, but different, as if it carried a message. Mr. Arman looked up at the sky, closed his notebook, and smiled. He whispered, "It's time." He stood up slowly, walked to the tree he had planted years ago, the one that grew from love, loss, and life. He placed the notebook at the base of the tree. Inside were all the stories he never told, all the lessons he never shouted, all the feelings he never showed. That evening, no one saw him. The bench was empty, the garden untouched, the air still. People came looking, quietly, respectfully. On the bench, they found a single white flower, and on the notebook left at the tree, there was one final line written in his handwriting. "I came here quietly, and I leave the same way. But if you ever sit here and listen, you'll still hear me." News of his passing spread, not through loud announcements, but through whispers, tears, and soft prayers. People gathered around the garden. Some brought candles, some brought books, some just sat in silence, as if trying to hear his voice in the wind. And many believed. They did. Years later, his house became a small library and peace center, free for all, built not with luxury, but with love. On the wall near the gate, there was a bronze plaque. It didn't say billionaire. It didn't say businessman. It simply said, "In memory of the quiet man who changed the world without saying a word." And so, when strangers visit the street today, locals point to the bench and say, "That's where the world slowed down. That's where peace lived. That's where silence finally spoke." And when the wind blows, rustling through the leaves of his tree, some say they still hear his voice, soft, gentle, everlasting. Kindness doesn't need sound. It just needs a place to land.